Welcome to Open World Chat. I'm your host, Jim Dandido. John Odom will be arriving momentarily. He just has to find the right payphone to play the noise into to connect to the meeting. We are joined tonight by Bleeding Cool's Kaitlyn Booth, editor-in-chief over at Bleeding Cool, and was in attendance at San Diego Comic-Con. And we are going to talk about all of the wild shit that happened there. Kaitlyn, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I haven't seen John in like 3 or 4 years now in real life.
He's... I don't know if I'm speaking out of school, but I suspect he's going to have some more free time coming up after Tuesday. So, Kaitlyn, let's jump right into it. What was the craziest thing you saw?
Oh my. Honestly, the craziest thing that happened to me personally was I did not get COVID.
Oof.
Yeah. I went to Celebration earlier this year and actually got COVID for the first time, and their masking policy, while they said it was, they were requiring masks, requiring vaccinations, they were not very good about actually maintaining that and like staying on top of people and saying, hey, you need to put your masks on. I was very impressed with CCI and how they were actually like on top of people and being like, you need to put your mask on, you need to keep your mask on. So I was actually very impressed by their security aspect and trying to keep people safe. So that actually was very surprising to me, because if you had asked me before going to San Diego, I was like, I'm going to get COVID again. So I 100% thought I was going to get sick. So that was very happy. I was honestly surprised by how little Warner Brothers and HBO showed up.
I guess the week that they had following San Diego, in hindsight, It kind of makes more sense, right?
Well, the Warner Brothers one, in retrospect, makes a lot more sense. But at the time, I was like, really? You guys are showing up with 2 movies? That's it? Like, as a massive Shazam fan, I was all for it. Like, I think Shazam is, like, I think the best DC movie still. It's up there. It's that and Suicide Squad are like my 2 favorite DC movies. Though I consider Wonder Woman to be the more impactful, I think Shazam is the better movie overall.
Yeah.
So I was super excited to see a ton of stuff from that, but I was like, no Aquaman. We're not. I don't blame them for not addressing the Flash at all, because that's still a mess.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about anything else. And then the House of the Dragon panel was just really a letdown. And I don't want to call out their moderator, but I will say that a good moderator can make or break a panel. And that the guy they had doing it was really I don't remember if it was a guy or a girl. The person they had doing that panel was really, really struggling to maintain a large group and keep it on focus.
I feel like no franchise has had more air let out of it more quickly than Game of Thrones too. They got to work to earn. I mean, it used to be that I would be furious if George Martin died before he finished the books. And I really don't care anymore, right? Like, go write, go make your money, like, do your thing. I don't care if I never see the end of it. And that I feel like I am going to wait for the entire series to finish and get good reviews front to back before I start even think about dipping into any of the Game of Thrones shows, right?
That's fair. Yeah, a lot of it had to do with the fact, and I think Lord of the Rings had less of this problem. I didn't get to go to that panel because I was at a different panel at that time, but I heard that the Lord of the Rings panel was better. But both of those shows put out a lot of stuff pre-San Diego, so this was just kind of building on hype, and they just didn't do a very good job of doing that, in my opinion.
That's fair.
And that panel was just like, I did a lot of live blogs. I think I live blogged almost every single panel in Hall H on Saturday, and that was the only one that flopped hard because no one cared.
Jeez. Yeah, that's rough. Now, that said, in retrospect, the juggernaut running through the entire show was Marvel's panel. And I think nobody could have brought anything that would have topped the hype coming out of the Marvel panel, right?
I think some people were concerned. People with bad memories were concerned because they have D23 in like 6 weeks. Everyone's like, oh, they're going to show up and they're going to half measure it. And I was like, were you guys here in 2019? Because we have pretty much the exact same schedule as we did in 2019, where we had San Diego and like 6 to 8 weeks later, we have D23, and both times they showed up in big ways. Like they announced all of Phase 4 and a chunk of Phase 5 last time, and then announced like 3 more movies at D23, like 3 more TV shows like 6 weeks later. So it's like, I was expecting them to come out pretty hard. I was not expecting him to talk about Phase 6 in any capacity. That took me by surprise.
And granted, they didn't really, but they did drop the 2 names, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, I started reading. So for the folks who don't know, Marvel announced all the rest of their movies for Phase 5, and they announced that the Fantastic Four movie is going to be the first movie of Phase 6, and the last 2 movies of Phase 6 are going to be Avengers: The Kang Dynasty and Avengers: Secret War. And I started to read The Kang Dynasty immediately after that announcement. And when I realized that was the story where Carol Danvers' time-displaced son tries to have sex with her, that was when I put it down.
They're so fun.
I know, right? God, gotta love it, right? And this is like 2002. It's not like, granted, Ultimatum was also like 2006, so it's not that weird. But
it's going to be as much the Kang Dynasty as Age of Ultron was Age of Ultron.
That's fair. You know what? What it's going to end up being is Avengers Forever, right?
Yeah,
it's going
to hope so. That's what I've been wanting to see forever. By the way,
I don't know why they don't just call it.
Hi, John.
Welcome.
Hi.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. My former boss for a very brief time. I was at Bleeding Cool after you had taken the reins. So yes. I get to refer to you as my ex-boss. And let me dropping in here just say before I, completely derail things that American Airlines, not for the weak.
No. Only for the strong-willed?
Only for the strong-willed.
Did you hold that plane together with the force of telekinesis?
No, I held my psyche together with the force of my psyche because...
It sounds like me trying to get home on Southwest the day after San Diego ended when there was that incident in Dallas. That was a fun day.
Anyway, the Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars to close Phase 6. Highly recommend nobody out there interested in the MCU with no experience in the comics. You should not try to read the Kang Dynasty under any circumstances. It is middle arc in a 7-year-long story. It is impenetrable. You will not understand a bit of it. It looks fun, though. Go read Avengers Forever instead. That is also impenetrable, but it's really ridiculous and a lot more fun. As for Secret Wars, what is the sense that we have on which Secret Wars they're going to do?
God. Considering what a traditional Feige is and how he does seem to have a lot of love for the original, I would probably say Secret Wars 1. But
are we kind of setting up for the second, though? Aren't the pieces in place or getting there?
The pieces being in place, at this point, it's really kind of unclear what the pieces of Phase 4, 5, and 6 are going to be. Feige has said that once 4 ends, which means once Wakanda Forever comes out at the end of the year, it's going to become much more clear what the overall story and where the direction they're heading is going to be. And I have a feeling that all of the pieces they have been laying out for the past, all of the movies and TV shows are going to become clear for everybody. But right now, it's very unclear. And everybody's been saying that. They're like, everything seems so directionless. It's like, well, everything was directionless up until like the end of Captain America, the First Avenger, because that's the way these things work. We have to kind of reset our psyche into how we look at these movies and these TV shows. And I think we're getting to that moment where, the Red Skull pulls out the Tesseract and we go, oh, we're dealing with the Infinity Stones. We're going to have a moment like that somewhere in Wakanda Forever where someone is going to reference something and we're going to go, oh, this is the direction we are heading. This is the moment.
I got you. The post-credit scene is an incursion with a parallel Latveria over Wakanda.
Well, we're getting Doom one way or the other.
Oh yeah. They wouldn't bring in the Fantastic Four without doing Doom. He's one of the best villains of all time. I don't know if they're going to do Doom in this phase or if they're going to save him for after. Honestly, I would say save him for after Phase 6.
So they're saying that Fantastic Four is not an origin movie, though, right?
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that too, but the implication is kind of they have to be on a different Earth, right?
Maybe.
Because if they exist on this Earth, the question is going to be where the hell have they been the whole time, right?
Well, there you go. You're traveling
with Carol. I mean, didn't Strange say in Multiverse of Madness something along the lines of, "I thought you guys were around in the '60s" or something like that? Like the Fantastic Four have been around. They are known.
I should go back and watch that.
They take off and they're in the negative zone for the last 40 years.
Yeah, there's an easy way to write their way around that. I mean, to say where have they been this whole time? They did it with Carol. They can do it with pretty much anybody. It's comics. There's easy ways to write around the where has everybody been type of thing.
That's fair.
It's the same way that you write around the whole why aren't the Avengers fighting together in the solo movies after Avengers 1? It's like, because they're not. Just go with it. They're doing other stuff, and because it's more fun if they're not. It's the Alfred Hitchcock thing. Why do people in thrillers not go to the cops? Because if they went to the cops, it would be boring. If every movie was a team-up movie, the team-ups wouldn't be special anymore.
That's fair. I still feel like I feel like they're going to do an incursion at the end of Wakanda Forever.
I think we're going to see Doom's armored hand. He's been there the whole time, and I'm sure we're going to get him. They've
been hinting at Namor since quite literally the second Iron Man. They had a spot. Yes, if you look. Okay, so if you want to look back, as far as Namor goes, they have been hinting about him since all the way back to Iron Man 2. If you go back and you look at the map behind Tony, when he's talking to Nick Fury at the very end, when he says, "You can't afford me," you see a spot on the map where Wakanda would be. That was the first hint of Black Panther. And then there is another spot in the middle of the ocean. That would be a hint for Namor. And then if you go into Mission Breakout in Disneyland, which is considered canon, there is relics from Atlanteans down in that in there. And that is considered part of the MCU. That ride is canon. So they've been hinting at Namor for forever now. So saying that Namor's been on the way for a while now it's just kind of been logical in my opinion.
Right.
It does seem inevitable.
Well, yeah. And if you're and like the Wakanda Atlantis political situation is also so tied up with Genosha and with Latveria, right? Like that. You guys have read Priest's Black Panther?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
There are like the whole interpolitical situation there is about Latveria, Wakanda, Atlantis, and Magneto's Genosha, like arguing, like bickering with each other on an international stage. It is, oh God, it's some of my favorite comics of all time. I feel it like that was the moment when I realized that Priest writes for me specifically, even though he had no idea who I was. And I have loved almost everything that he's written since. His Deathstroke was nuts. But yeah, so like if you're doing the Atlantis Wakanda stuff, there is such an easy nexus to Doom. Mm-hmm. And if you really want it, to the mutants.
Well, Ms. Marvel has confirmed that they're going in that direction.
Yeah, and like the easiest thing to do, right? If you're not gonna try and do mutants just appeared in the Marvel universe, the easiest thing to do is to open an X-Men movie or an X-Men series with the first quote of House of X, right? While you slept, the Earth changed, and boom! All of a sudden, they're all on Krakoa. Right, and everybody
been there the whole time, and it's like, we never really wanted to talk about it because that seemed like a bad idea.
Yeah, like we know what you guys were going to do.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's like that. It's like they could quite literally make a very, very poignant in the closet metaphor and go back to what Singer did, in the early movies, and lean way into the LGBT stuff, and like we very much were leaning into the being in the closet metaphor and being like we couldn't show ourselves because it was not safe. And then
you can also. How do you know it wasn't safe? Well, we had this lady who's lived for 1,000 years over the course of 10 lifetimes, hiding in a bubble on the bottom of our island, and and then you can do those stories too.
I would say the easiest way would just be to say, look at how you guys treated that girl who accidentally blew up the people blew up the embassy in Civil War. Look how you guys treated Wanda.
Yeah.
That's why we never decided to say anything, because, initially you'd be like, well, why wouldn't we say anything? It seems logical. But Iron Man and the whole thing starts happening, and I can imagine that a community would be like, oh, well, maybe it's safe. Maybe it's safe. Then Civil War happens and you go, never the hell mind. I'm not doing that. Because if you look at Wanda, you would go, that looks like a mutant. That looks like what they would do to us.
Yeah. I feel like they should stop talking about Wanda, though. Like, she just got done. She did so dirty.
She did.
Right? With the exception of Wanda.
I literally wrote 1,500 words about how angry I was about how they treated Wanda.
It's just like, it's the Burr in Multiverse of Madness, right? Like, besides the gaping story issue that I have with it, it was a fun movie, right? But every time I think about the Wanda stuff in it, it just made me really angry.
Yeah, like I said, it took me 1,500 words to air out my feelings about how I felt about this.
I appreciate it. I hear you. We are all on the same team here on this.
I think we are. Yeah.
Horse shit. They should watch their own fucking television shows.
Well, she's coming back. She's going to be back. There'll be redemption.
Sure, that's fine. They can resurrect her on Krakoa, right? Oh, she's a mutant now. What else? What else is hot stuff coming out of San Diego that got you excited?
Well, something that I was not excited about. I feel like such a Debbie Downer, but
no, fine. Let's be mad about stuff. I'm cool with that.
I was one of the people that really hated What If.
Wow.
Yes.
Who are you who is so wise in the ways of science?
I didn't love What If myself.
I hated What If. I think the only episode that worked ultimately in the end was the second episode, and that was it. All of the other ones were
was
bad.
An actual episode. The rest of them stopped at the beginning of the third act.
Yeah. So in the Marvel Animation panel, they showed us the first episode of season 2 of What If, and I just sat there and went, okay. It's more of the same. So if you liked season 1 of What If, you're going to like season 2 of What If. If you didn't like season 1 of What If, or if you're one of the people who's been sitting on it for a couple months and looking back on it and going, that really wasn't very good, you're going to look back at this and go, yeah, this isn't very good. And it's not.
That's a real shame. You'd think that I know the first season was generally well liked, but these are good creative sorts.
I feel like it was well liked initially, and as the months have gone on, I have seen more and more people start to turn on it, which is fascinating to me.
Well, none of it was well thought through, and I think I think there's been enough time there. You'd like to think that they would look to improve upon what they had done originally.
Well, that's the problem with animated shows, is they take so long to develop. I knew as soon as they announced season 2, they're like, well, there's not enough time for them to course correct for anything that they did in season 1 to look at any objections that people had to season 1. They're too far along in production for season 2. So season 2 is going to be more of the same as season 1 because they thought what season 1 worked. Season 2 does not.
Well, can we step back and look at all of Phase 4? Because it's been really hit or miss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
within the same movie, sometimes hit or miss.
Right. With Multiverse of Madness. Multiverse of Madness was half a great movie and half of a kind of obnoxious MCU stock fare. Mm-hmm. I thought Ms. Marvel was terrific.
I love
Captain Winter Soldier was terrible.
I thought it was good until the last episode and didn't know how to close the deal.
I thought it was bad.
I would argue that probably, aside from maybe 3 of the Marvel's TV shows, none of them have stuck the landing at all.
I thought WandaVision and Loki and Ms. Marvel, I think, came the closest.
See, I hate the ending to Loki. I hate the ending of Loki. Hate it.
Oh, that's too bad. I enjoyed Loki. WandaVision was perfect, except for the fact that I felt so trolled by Evan Peters. I'm never going to get over that.
I can live with that. My problem with WandaVision, my problem with all of this stuff is the places where it feels unique and individual are the places where they shine the most, right? Ms. Marvel felt very distinct from start to finish, which is why Ms. Marvel, I think, is the best one, right? Loki was really strong for like the first 80% of it. And then it kind of became like it became an MCU plot mover towards the end, which is where it started getting weaker. WandaVision was very, very striking until the last episode. which I think was still good, but it wasn't as strong as the earlier episodes because it was the most MCU-y.
Although it did have my favorite part of the whole series in that last episode.
Which one? White Vision?
The interaction between the visions.
I thought that stuff was good.
Fascinating.
It's the interaction between the White Visions was great. The zapping each other with the beam lasers, with the forehead lasers was like, whatever, okay, do less of this, right? And I think WandaVision is hurt in retrospect by Doctor Strange too, because it's rendered kind of meaningless.
Well, the whole point of WandaVision was that Wanda was being painted in shades of gray, where it was obvious that she was doing this intentionally, but was she doing it intentionally? She was hurting people, but she wasn't really meaning to. Her powers were kind of controlling her. She wasn't really controlling them, and yada, yada, yada. And then Multiverse of Madness kind of went, never mind, she's just totally evil now. She's going to kill a kid. And it's just like, it took all the ambiguity from her character that was so good. In literally the first moment we've met her, she's been very ambiguous. She's been, is she one of the good guys? Is she one of the bad guys? She's always kind of walked that line of is she going to go off the deep end? Even right from the beginning, we always kind of saw that. Even somebody who isn't familiar with her character from comics could see that. And then they took all of that ambiguity that we saw in that was very apparent in WandaVision, and this went, well, now she wants to kill a kid.
Yeah.
And it's they just made it very black and white. And I feel like Multiverse of Madness could have been improved dramatically by making it less black and white as to whether or not she was wholly evil or wholly good. And while I appreciate the fact that they didn't tease out that she was the villain for the whole movie, because they very easily could have done that.
Yeah.
They also just kind of, like I said, they took away all of the things that made her interesting, and also went with the whole powerful women don't get to stay powerful. They can't control their power. Therefore, they turn evil, and therefore they need to be put down like Old Yeller.
Yep.
Which Marvel Comics seems to have a problem with a lot in Phase 4.
Doctor
Which I also wrote a very, very long article about after Thor: Love and Thunder.
I haven't seen that one yet. I'm sure.
You haven't seen Thor: Love and Thunder yet?
Jeez.
No, my first trip to the movies since Rise of Skywalker was when I took my kid to see the League of Super Pets last weekend.
Super Pets is fun.
I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. It was silly. I do kind of wish they had gotten real voice actors to do the characters instead of getting celebrities to do it. But the deep cut DC stuff was really Orange Kryptonite. Awesome. Loved it. Orange Kryptonite being what give the animals the powers. Fantastic for me. Right. So I have not seen Love and Thunder yet, but again, so Shang-Chi, 80% of it was awesome, and 20% of it was just bland, boring, forgettable crap, right?
Yeah, I'd argue that Shang-Chi is the best of Phase 4, hands down.
I think so, although Eternals sticks with you.
I'm going to be an Eternals apologist. It was problematic.
I don't have a problem with Eternals, but I would say that Shang-Chi is the strongest movie overall. Eternals is a movie, again, I'm going to reference another article I wrote because I get my thoughts out on articles. That's what I do. But one of the things I wrote when Eternals and Dune came out was I said that both of those movies are paced and structured very weird. And they kind of take you off balance. And when you go back and rewatch them, both of them are vastly improved on a rewatch. So everyone I've told that doesn't like Eternals and didn't like Dune, I tell them to go back and rewatch it again, because now that you know how this is paced, where everything is going, you kind of just sit back and go with the vibes. And both of those movies are improved by getting back to sit back and just go with the vibes.
Eternals was 1,000% improved on the second viewing. I got sucked into it, and I left thinking, I was sort of underwhelmed. Yeah, I was a little underwhelmed by Shang-Chi. It was fine. I was very underwhelmed by Black Widow. And
Tony Leung was the best villain that the MCU has had. He was awesome. He was so good in that movie. I watched that movie, and then immediately afterwards, I was reading something about how weirdly sexless the MCU has been. And I'm like, did you not just see the two of them fight bang
I
in
was about to say,
Shang-Chi.
did you guys not see the same fight scene I did? Because I'm pretty sure I just watched a fight sex scene in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, that was like that. That they beat Eternals to the punch there, man. They were definitely doing it. And I'm cool with it.
Incidentally, Shang-Chi, my Christian conservative dad's favorite Marvel movie.
Really?
Really?
Huh.
He loves that movie.
It's about preserving the nuclear family, right? It's fine.
Yes.
He's fighting for his kids.
I guess.
We could do a whole episode talking about my Christian conservative parents' view of nerd properties. It's a very entertaining conversation. I'll have to.
What did they think about Eternals?
They messaged me 90 minutes in and said, "Do we need to keep watching this?"
No.
Because they had watched it at home because they had no desire to watch it in the theater. And I said, "Yes, keep going." And they watched the last hour and they're like, "Okay, we like it." But they had a really hard time with that first 90 minutes, which I don't entirely blame them, especially watching it at home and not being like limited to a theater, being able to pause it at any time you wanted to.
Yeah.
I don't know that they had the stunt casting of Robb Stark and Jon Snow pushing them along either.
They've never watched a single episode of Game of Thrones, so that didn't mean a thing to either of them.
Yeah.
Well, Eternals has the same challenge that the comic did, and that's that it just doesn't seem to fit in with the rest of anything. You just have to look at it as standalone, and they're going to try to really shoehorn this stuff into, for the next phase into the rest of the MCU. And I don't know.
Kieran Gillen is making it work. The crossover that's happening right now, Kieran Gillen's Eternals is probably the best that the comic has been since Kirby.
You beat Gaiman's. Gaiman's was awesome.
It beats Gaiman's,
and it integrated it great into the Marvel.
And then Gillen is also writing Immortal X-Men. He's the flagship X-Men book right now, and the crossover with the Eternals trying to trying to murder all the mutants is really strong, really, really, really strong. So and it works. It works logically within the context of the Marvel Universe. It is. Well,
if the comics are anything right now, it's that they are workshops for future movies. So
yes.
Yeah.
So keep an eye. Although they need to put a lot of work into Mr. Sinister if they're going to pull him off on screens.
So this is the most freewheeling conversation we've ever had on one of these shows. Do we have a topic anymore? We're just kind of shooting the shit.
Yeah,
aren't we?
We're just talking about stuff, right? I mean, eventually we'll probably oh my God, are we already at like
I know, right?
Right, like 15 more minutes. Maybe we should now circle back around.
I haven't done a podcast in a while. I like talking to people about this stuff.
I know. We usually are a little more directive, but the hell with it.
Right? Like, let's stretch it out, whatever.
Yeah.
So DC, the DCEU is a flaming shit show right now. Shall we discuss?
Is it even a thing?
They have a 10-year plan. They have a 10-year plan to have a 10-year plan.
In 2015, they had a 10-year plan in 2018. They had a 20-year plan like 2 years ago.
Right.
This is sort of like the conversation about when we're going to get nuclear fusion.
It feels like, honestly, no, it feels like mouse China
20 years.
At this point.
I honestly feel so bad for the people in like mid-tier jobs at Warner Brothers for having to go through all of these regime changes. I can't even imagine it.
Well, and to just continue, like every time it seems like it's going to look up, right? Yeah. You end up discovering that the people running you are some of the dumbest people in the world.
And the thing is, I don't even think Zaslav is a dumb person. If you look at it, how he's looking at it, and I don't even think he's looking at it in a bad way. He is looking at it as he sees what's happening at Netflix, and Netflix is kind of crashing and burning. And he's saying, why would I possibly pump $70 million into a movie and then just put it on a streaming service? That makes no sense to him, especially when they don't have the kind of revenue at the theater that somebody like Disney has. Disney can go, we can drop $150 million into our streaming service TV shows because we have movies that are making that in 3 days. Like, who cares? Warner Brothers doesn't have that kind of revenue. They don't have that kind of revenue stream in. So I don't blame him for going, we need to shift to theatrical. I don't understand why they would just write off these movies as tax things, because I always thought the whole point of having your own streaming service was for a moment like this, where you have a movie where you're like, I don't want to put any more money into this. I don't want the money for a theatrical release, and I don't want the money to market it. So why can't you just release it?
I have a theory.
Without any pop and circumstance. Like Netflix releases stuff. Like, again, we don't need to, like, comparing it to Netflix is probably a bad comparison because Netflix is currently on fire as well. But Netflix releases stuff all the time and never says anything about it. So it's like, why couldn't they do that with these movies? Why couldn't they let them finish post on Batgirl? Why couldn't they let them do the last, like, less than 10% of stuff they have left on this Scoob one? On the Scoob Holiday Haunts, especially the Scoob one. Like, everyone's been very distracted about the DC stuff, and I don't blame anybody for being distracted about the DC stuff. I actually find the cancellation of the Scoob sequel to be infinitely more interesting because Scoob, that movie was like one of the third or fourth big releases that got pulled from theatrical and put onto PVOD during the pandemic. It was released in May 15th. Of 2020, like a month after Trolls World Tour kind of lit that whole industry on fire. It did really, really well for Warner Brothers. It was number one on all of the streaming services for a week. I think it was for 2 weeks, and it was in the top 5 for another week. It had a pretty short window where it stayed in the top 5 and then got moved to HBO Max. It's like, you have the numbers right there in front of you saying there is a VOD and PVOD and streaming market for this movie. It's right there. With Batgirl, they don't really have the proof that there is the audience for that movie. That I can understand. For Scoob, they've got the numbers. The first one was a PVOD and a streaming release. They saw it do well. They saw it do well enough to merit a sequel, and yet they pulled it because they didn't think it would do well enough on streaming, even though they had the proof of the numbers that the first one did well enough on streaming.
I don't know. Maybe the streamer numbers are more dire than we think, right?
No, I'll tell you what it is. I got it all figured out. Okay. Because the farther you step back with Warner, it gets even weirder. You know, they're cutting like full frontal with Samantha Bee. Mm-hmm. All kinds of things. I think you have somebody who came in and the new regime, first thing they said, we're not doing anything until we get $1 billion in write-downs. That's it. We're not even going to think about anything else and do that. And they just start going down the list. That's why you had such bad messaging around getting rid of Batgirl. We don't like it. We don't have faith in it. We're not believing it. It's not part of our strategy, because they're just going down the list. They hit some key big ones they can get quick write-offs on, but they're going for $1 billion write-down. Period. They're not thinking about anything else until they get that done. So why some of this stuff doesn't make sense?
Because I listened to a Twitter Spaces with Eric Davies of Fandango and Humberto Gonzalez of the Wrap, and they were talking about this whole situation. And Humberto, it had been revealed that Batgirl tested in like the 60s, which is not great, but it's not bad for a first test. Like, that's what a first test is for, is to test the audience and then go back and do some reshoots and re-editing and test again, and it's usually better. The first It tested in the 60s. You want to know what else tested in the 60s that Warner is throwing its full weight behind? Black Adam. So it's like the narrative that the New York Post, specifically the New York Post, went with was that they canceled this movie because it's bad. And I have been saying since day one, that is not the reason they canceled this movie. It's not because it's bad. It's like, you guys can say that's why it was canceled all you want. You can say that's the reason. That's not the reason. The quality thing has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. Because if it did, like, if studios release bad movies all the time, right, every day studios drop hundreds of millions of dollars into bad movies and they get released. We've seen a bunch of them this year because I've had to sit through all of them. I have to go see them all. I had to see Morbius. I know bad movies. I know bad comic book movies.
No, please don't wipe the illusion of Morbin time from us.
I was in that panel when that joke happened. For the love of God, I nearly melted into my chair in secondhand embarrassment. I wanted to die.
Oh man.
What worries me the most about this stuff, about this Warner stuff, though, is that there's a ton, like you said, there's a ton of good stuff happening there, right? Sandman was really good. I really liked it. I think it's the best possible adaptation they could have made, and I would really love to see a second season of it. not a chance in hell. There's no way, right? But it would be cool if it happened. DC
managing editors loved Sandman. He's been reading it since it first came out, and he said that it was near perfect, is what he told me.
Yeah, it is really like I can't think of anything that I would have had them do differently. And there are pieces of it that they did better than the comics, which is insane to say. It's insane to hear myself say it out loud, because the comics are a masterpiece. But there's like Morpheus's characterization. Sorry, don't edit that. That's terrifying. Morpheus's characterization in the show is in places stronger than it was in the comics. So make a second season, please, God, let it happen.
Not happening.
No, it's absolutely not happening. No. I know. I've resigned myself to that fact. But the comics also, right? The comics line, top to bottom, is stronger than it's ever been. At least as long as I've been reading, and I've been reading since Death of Superman-ish. You know, I'm a Triangle Era partisan. I'm a Nightfall partisan. But with the exception of Morrison's run, I think the current run on Action is the best Superman since the early 90s.
It's pulled me back into it. It takes a lot to pull me back into Superman.
I know. Wonder Woman Historia is going to be one of the all-time greatest Wonder Woman stories ever told. But like the Wonder Woman line is also really, really strong behind it. It's not just the prestige splashy books that are doing well. Chip Zdarsky's Batman was nuts.
Man does nuts.
The fact that Chip Zdarsky, the guy who had to scour the internet to delete all traces of his burn book ideas for these characters because he keeps getting to write them, and he keeps doing really, really well with them, right? Like his Spider-Man was incredible. His Daredevil's really good. His Batman's going to be excellent, or it has been excellent so far, right? You've got like, it's just, there's bits and pieces of the DC universe that are bananas strong. And if it's going to kill me if they touch it, right? And like, knock on wood, they're too out of the way. They're too small to be drawing that kind of attention, but I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling good right now about it.
I think on the movie and TV front, I know a lot of people were worried about Blue Beetle. I have a lot of things to say about Humberto Gonzalez, but he has a lot of love, and the Blue Beetle movie means a lot to him. And he has been the one who's like been breaking all of the casting. I think he might have been one of the first people to like really, really confirm it was coming out. And he was saying that he's double checking all of his sources, but he thinks that one's going to be okay because they shifted it to theatrical really early on in the production and then gave it a budget boost. So the shifting to theatrical and giving it the budget boost gives them the justification for continuing to leave it right where it is and not touch it. It just wrapped filming, I think, a couple months ago. They've just begun post-production, I believe, and they have a year to get post done. And there was also there were the leaked pictures of the suit, and we all know how leaked pictures of suits usually do. The reactions were great. Everybody loves that suit. They think it looks awesome, and it does. It looks really good. And usually those suits look terrible in leaked pictures, but that one looks really good. So I think Blue Beetle's going to be okay. I'm one of like the two people in the universe who's like, oh, this Joker movie actually sounds really interesting. And I didn't like the first Joker. I thought it was terrible.
I still haven't watched the first one.
Really?
Yeah, I'll get around to it eventually.
It's not the Joker. It's not the Joker, but
I appreciate it more for the absolute swing that it is than what it actually is.
Yeah.
But like just the fact that they called it Joker Folie à Deux, and Folie à Deux means madness of two. It's an actual psychological affliction where somebody's psychosis in a very codependent either relationship or family relationship is so bad that they quite literally influence the person who is with them. There's a really this is where my true crime hole that I fell in during quarantine actually came in handy, because I read that and I was like, I know what that means. There were these twins who who had it happen, where one of them had an episode and she influenced her sister, and it actually left a man dead. And she was absolved of the crime because she was quite literally found to be psychotic at the time because of what was happening with her sister. And it's like, that sounds like an affliction that would happen when we're talking about Joker and Harley. And the fact that they're talking about making it a musical, I'm like, that's such a massive, absolutely off-the-wall swing. Yes, please.
Yes,
that sounds so weird. I want to see it.
So Lady Gaga's definitely playing Harley?
Yes, she posted like a little video confirming it on social media a couple days ago. Like right before the Batgirl stuff happened. That whole thing, I think, came down, or right before the conference call that I listened to the whole thing of for some reason. So I have to listen to the conference call because it's part of my stupid job.
Well, because we were all waiting for the 70% of HBO Max getting laid off news, right? I wasn't on the conference call, but I definitely scrolled through the Den of Geeks Slack a couple of times during dinner while I was feeding my children.
Yeah.
No, you can leave that in.
There's their little slideshow that they probably thought they were so proud of that they're getting absolutely dragged for.
Yep. Men are from HBO Max, women are from Magnolia Network.
Oh my God. I just sat there and was like, I have no words. I have too many words. I haven't decided which one it is yet.
I mean, I feel like you can definitely rationalize most of the decisions that they've made from a business perspective, but the slideshow from the investor presentation makes it feel better to just dump on them for being idiots, right?
Oh my God, it was so bad.
I need to find this.
It's really, really dumb. It's really dumb.
It's really bad. It's basically, let's look at Mad Men and go, yeah, that's a good way to do things in 2022.
Yep.
Oh dear.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Well, Kaitlyn, thank you so much for joining us today to talk all sorts of shit about all the dumb Hollywood decisions and the Marvel movies that we don't like. We would love to have you back again soon to talk about why other Marvel products are terrible. And we're glad to discuss this with you. Where can folks find you online, Kaitlyn?
You can see me over at Bleedy Cool. I'm always writing articles there. You can find me on Twitter at Katie's Movies. That's where I'm usually posting the most. Those are probably the two main places you can find me these days, is on Twitter and over on Bleeding Cool. I primarily post in the film section, but once She-Hulk starts coming out, my TV editor has strong-armed me into continuing to be our Marvel TV reviewer. So you'll be seeing my weekly reviews of She-Hulk coming out.
Cool. Make sure you watch all three Shreks beforehand so you can catch all the Easter eggs.
Good Lord.
It's not funny. It's abuse. We shouldn't be laughing at the fate of the poor VFX artists that Marvel is mistreating. It's really gross, though. Anyway, thank you, Kaitlyn. Thank you, John. Everybody. Good talk.
And our theme music is by Christopher Piatek.